Greetings to everyone here. Thank you for your time, your attention, and all the work that you all do. We know collectively that this is almost like preaching to the choir with this group that's assembled here. This is the first of a collaborative attempt to enlighten the people. We are calling these works the Black Consciousness Podcast. And we could not have been given a finer guest for the first one. So I will like to thank everyone for their sacrifices. I see from several different podcasts and broadcasts, Dr. Charles Alexander is on here and several others. So we're blessed to speak with someone this evening, Dr. Karenga, with respect to the 1967 Black Power Conference. It's been titled one of the first Black Power Conferences. And with no further delay, I would like to hand things over to Professor Rahh.
Yeah, Asante Sana, Brother Larry Field. And we thank you for that message that you just delivered. First of all, I want to say Asante Sana to Dr. Karenga and the organization us for being here and strong and strength, and everybody else that's on the line to hear this momentous discussion about the Black Power movement. And there were a number of years that it took place, 66, 67, and 68. Dr. Karenga will cover all of that. And we want to first let you know that Dr. Karenga, beyond all his credits, he's my best friend, best brother, best leader, best teacher. And it's just been a pleasure for me to be studying Kawita philosophy since 1979. And it's transformed me personally. But anyway, Dr. Karenga is a professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at California State University of Long Beach. He's creator of Kwanzaa and then Nguzo Saba. He's author of Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture. He's executive director of the African American Culture Center, and it's just a beautiful thing to have him on with the many traits that he has as far as organization. He's also the creator of the organization US, and that has been around since 59 years and 260 seasons, as we say. And he's one of the most profound and excellent recognized scholars and activists in the country as far as his activities and the institutions that he has helped build and the people that he has transformed lives into a liberational mentality and language. There's so many accolades I could discuss about Dr. Karenga, but I'm just going to go ahead and let him go ahead, and if Chimbuku or any of the Sabres want to add any other accolades, they're welcome. But I'm just excited. I'm like Dr. Fields. I just want to get this historical thing, because many people don't think that there was a Black Power movement at all. They look at the Civil Rights movement because the European focuses on that. And they don't realize the accomplishments and achievement of the Black Power movement. There was a liberation movement, there was a Civil Rights movement, and a Black Power movement. And Dr. Karenga and all the leaders worked together to bring us to this day. So Dr. Karenga, would you go ahead, and if I missed anything, you can add about your credits, and if there's anything else.
No, no, you did very well. And I'm sorry I didn't have my mic on, or I would have showed us the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance, but that was good. And so what we're here to do is talk about Black Power. And Black Power we defined as, a collective struggle for Black people to achieve three things: self-determination, self-respect, and self-defense. And we saw it as a righteous revolt. And so these principles of self-determination, self-respect, and self-defense, essential to Black Power, revolt, and resistance movement, spoke to both our central goals and practice that we had to engage in order to realize our goal When the final analysis, as our philosophy Kawida teaches us, practice proves and makes possible everything. So self-determination requires a practice of controlling the space we occupy. You can remember that, Professor Rahh, when we talk about community control. We have to control the space we occupy in this country and the world, African community, and that's our destiny, and controlling our destiny in daily lives. We want to control the institutions of our community. Self-respect means engaging in practices that are culturally grounded, right? Speaking our own special culture truth, legitimizing, self-authorizing ourselves, and being so rooted in our culture that we are affirmed and honor our identity and dignity as African persons and people. And we legitimize the life we live, the work we do, and the struggle we wage. We don't seek outside authorization for what we do or legitimation. We legitimize ourselves. We're self-authorizing. And then the third thing, self-defense, we mean affirming and practice our right and responsibility to defend ourselves against systemic and social violence and against oppression by any means society compels us to take and by any sacrifices we're required to make. So it was in the summer of '66, in the summit of Black Power in DC, and in the summer of '67 at the Black Power Conference in New York, that we played a major role. I was the vice president of the Continuation Committee. When in '66, Representative or Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, one of the strongest persons in Congress, he was head of the Ways and Means for a while. And also he called us and said, you know, what do y'all want to do for Black Power? How do you institutionalize it? How do you make it real? And so he asked us to form a committee, and we formed a committee. Dr. Nathan Wright out of Newark was the chair. He was mainly a fundraiser, but he's a good organizer, man. And so, and he worked, and he and I worked very well together. And I became the theorist for it and the organizer for it too. And so we use Kawida as our philosophy, and our fundamental principle was Nguzo Saba, you know, and we played a major role in the Black political culture since then, right? And you know, this Black Power movement was the basis for building other things: Black arts, Black studies, Black student union, Black youth, Black conferences, Black liberation theology, reparations, rites of passage, independent Black schools. And later on, you know, we had Afrocentricity, the Million Man March, and ancient Egyptian Mayan studies, Ifa ethical studies. But all of this began in our coming into the Blackness of ourselves. And I need to right here mention that what preceded us was the Nation of Islam, the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his most noted scholar representative, Haji Malcolm X. And we were very influenced by Haji Malcolm X. I mean, the things he taught about third world alliances, the things he taught about Pan-Africanism, things he taught about cultural revolution, armed defense or the right of self-defense. All those things was very important to us. And one of the things about the messenger Elijah Muhammad, is that he was the first to sacralize Blackness, right? Even divinize it, right? I made it something special after years of being denied this, you know, the sacred place it deserves. Here we had an organization that made Blackness sacred. That was very transformative for us, right? And so what we did was start this Black Power movement in about this 1965. It lasted approximately 1975. And the first conference is an informal kind of conference in 1966 in Washington, D.C. 1967, we went to Newark. 1968, we went to Philadelphia. So this Black Power period of Black liberation movement began in '65 and lasted until 1975. And it was clearly defined by an increase in openly Black-centered local, national, and international organization and initiative. The Watch Revolt of '65 marked and defined struggle, the beginning of a new era And from that time, with the founding of our organization, us, and the ideological and practical struggle that raged across the country and the world, lessons of revolt and revolution were learned, practiced, and shared. The year 1967 was defined by its revolts in Newark and Detroit, the first Black Power Conference, the founding of the Simba Wachanga, the Young Lions, armed, trained, disciplined, and engaged, and in the formation of numerous other groups which announced and explored different and similar opinions of struggle. It thus represented, in this time, our sisters and brothers, it represented the flowering of various schools of thought and ways to pursue resistance and achieve liberation. And again, all these initiatives constituted the Black Liberation Movement or the Black Freedom Movement and offered lessons for us, our organization, us, and all other organizations, right? So the organization, in these 59 years and 236 seasons of struggle, began with teaching that in the context of oppression, there is no remedy or effective response except righteous and relentless resistance. That there's no relevant strategy without the centrality of struggle, and no dignity affirming and promising way forward for us as a people, except on the battlefield to be ourselves, free ourselves, and build a good world and future we all want and deserve. So we taught struggle. Black Power taught us to seek struggle, to engage in struggle. But struggle we teach in Kawi is the defining feature of what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, what it means to assert oneself in a free, righteous, and rewarding way. And the struggle for liberation and to expand the realm of freedom is part of our being human, being ourselves as Africans, and engaging and transforming the world in life-enhancing, dignity-affirming, and world-preserving way. And one of the most important lessons from our struggle is also the centrality of identity and idea of Blackness, Blackness as a practice, our Africanness in its most expansive meaning. Everybody was saying Black, like Haji Malcolm said, one time Black people wouldn't even say, you could get in a fight, somebody called you Black. But during the Black Power period, we emerged as a result of the teachings of the nation, right? And then identified with Africa rising. We took real seriously Blackness. We said liberation is coming from a Black thing. And we said, of course, what is Black? We had to ask ourselves, what is Black? And we said Black is three things, right? Color, culture, and consciousness. And Black color is, our phenotype, the skin, the melanin, right? We said, well, that's not enough because there's some dark white people, right? So you have to have something else to define you. And then we say it has to be culture. And what is culture? Culture is the way of living. Culture is a longer definition. It is the totality of sensibilities, that's feelings, sensibilities, thought, and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates, sustains, and develops itself, and introduces itself into history and humanity. And that occurs on at least 7 basic levels in terms of history, religion or spirituality and ethics, social organization, economic organization, political organization, creative production, which is your art, your music, your literature. And then finally, of course, ethics, the collective self-consciousness that a people achieves as a result of activity in those other 6 areas. So Blackness, again, is not simply color, but more definitively culture and consciousness that leads, that's the third thing, the consciousness that leads to liberating practices directed toward our flourishing as a people, our well-being in the world, and our coming to the fullness of ourselves. Therefore, we call for back to Black. And we're asserted with that first step forward, we say is a step backward to ourselves. Haji Malcolm used to say, people were running around and say, I ain't left nothing in Africa. He said, yeah, you left your mind there. And we got to go back, he said. Even if we can't go physically, we got to go back culturally. And that's what I've done with the majority of my professional life, actually, almost 200, I didn't say 200%, that was a little bit too much. 99% of my life is built on that. I can't see any difference, maybe 100% in reality. So we understood as we do now, that in order to free ourselves, we must be ourselves, our Black self. And we cannot be ourselves, let alone come into the fullness of ourselves, if we doubt ourselves, deny ourselves, condemn ourselves, and mutilate ourselves, trying to look like and act like and speak like the people who caused the pathology in us in the first place. And so surely we as a Black people must struggle to get beyond those things taught by the dominant society. If we deny our existence as Black persons and the Black people, there's no injury or oppression. We can't even ask for reparations. If you're not Black, you can't ask for it. So you got to be Black, you know? That's the need to struggle to end this kind of confusion. If we doubt ourselves, if we doubt our destiny, our dignity, our right, then we give our oppressor an evil opening to deny our humanity and our human rights and violate both. And if we condemn ourselves as Black people, we borrow from and build on the language and illogic of our oppressor to indict ourselves and render ourselves the pathological threat he uses to oppress and kill us in the streets and in our homes and other places as a matter of public policy and socially sanctioned practice. And if we mutilate ourselves in a vain attempt to look, sound, and think like our oppressor and gain his approval, we exhibit willfully self-destructive practices and fail to reaffirm, recover, and raise our own paradigm of human excellence and achievement. And therefore, we will contribute to one of the greatest human problems of our time, the progressive Europeanization of human culture and human consciousness. And the third that we learned from Haji Malcolm was very important in Black Power, that every space is a battle space. Haji Malcolm, Minister Malcolm X said, quote, wherever Black people are, there is a battle line. And that whether we're in the East, whether we're in the North or the South, the East or the West, you and I are in a country that is a battle line. And he was really repeating in different words the whole concept that Nana Paul Robeson, who I say Nana, that's the honored one. We usually say that for people who've made transition for our ancestors. So Nana Paul Robeson said that the battlefront is everywhere. There's no sheltered rear. And so I think what we were saying, we must wage righteous and relentless struggle everywhere. If Haji Malcolm said, wherever Black people, there's a battle line, we in the organization, us said, what? Everywhere a battle line, every day, a call to struggle. It's also the teachings of Odu Ifa, the sacred text of our Yoruba ancestors, that the battle can be lost at home before we reach the battle outside. And so we have to strengthen ourselves inside for the struggle we're going to wage outside. And the strength must begin with our family and our community, but it can only be tested and tempered in confrontation with the oppressor in a test of will, a test of hearts, a test of mind, and a test of struggle. And we don't mind struggling first to overcome our weaknesses. For Nana Amilcar Cabral, revolutionary struggle, revolutionary thinker and leader, he says that we must struggle to turn our weaknesses into strength. That's what struggle is, turning our weaknesses into strength and daring to defy and defeat our enemy and build a good world we all want and deserve to live in. And it called this, I want to end with this. Everyone is responsible. And this is a lesson from Frantz Fanon, Nana Frantz Fanon, but also Haji Malcolm X, that we must free ourselves. We must self-raise. Haji Malcolm called it self-raising, right? You got to raise yourself, not by yourself, but in community, right? And Nana Frantz Fanon says, an authentic, a true, a real national liberation exists only to the precise degree to which each person has irreversibly begun their own liberation in the context of the overall liberation struggle. And as Nana Harriet Tubman taught us, this liberation and struggle to achieve that liberation must be for and through our community, for freedom is indivisible. So I want to stop right there. I think I give enough for us to talk about. I want to see what y'all think, and do you have any more questions
Asante, Dr. Karenga, Asante Sana, for your excellent presentation. I just wanted you to cover a couple of things. One, there were a number of organizations, the East, the Black Liberation Army, the Black, we had
Ahidiana, the East Ahidiana, the Independent School, CB, Council of Independent Institution, all those groups like that, and Urban Survivor Training Center, Committee for Unified Newark, quite a few.
Yes.
And I think I said Ahidiana. If I didn't, I want to. Mm-hmm.
And would you just go briefly over when you introduced? I remember I was at the Black Congress back in the '60s. They was meeting. I was security for Bob Simmons, young man.
That's right.
And then what happened was you had introduced the concept that you didn't introduce it there. You had always been saying the key crisis in Black people's life is a culture crisis. Mm-hmm. Could you just explain that? Why did you say that and what that really means?
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to say, Professor Rod, you brought it up in terms of the Black Congress. Our organization, us, was a founding member of that. And I was the first vice chair for that. And all the major organizations were there, right, in the Black Congress. And for a while, we built well. But then the COINTELPRO interrupted us and got us off track. But we can talk about that later. So I started out, and I was a student at UCLA working on my first doctorate. And I left the university. I wanted to join the movement. I wanted to help build a movement. And I wanted to build an institution that would last and contribute to the movement. And I argued then, as I argue now, that the key crisis in Black life, the key challenge in Black life, is the cultural crisis. And when I say the cultural crisis, I mean a crisis in views and values, starting with how we understand ourselves, because how we understand ourselves determines how we assert ourselves. If you got a diminished conception of yourself, a diminished understanding of yourself, then you have a diminished sense of agency and self-assertion in the world, right? You bow your head, you can't speak up, right? You laugh when something ain't funny, you scratch your head, you do all the kind of things because you're nervous with yourself. But if you got a strong understanding of yourself, if you really take yourself seriously and believe that we are not only the fathers and mothers of humanity, but the fathers and mothers of human culture and human civilization, that we stood up first, spoke the first human truth, taught the world what was good and beautiful, taught fundamental concepts in the Nile Valley that usually attributed to the Abrahamic tradition, like humans are in the image of God. That's us first. That humans are bearers of dignity. That's us. Shepesu is the Egyptian word for dignity. People who possess dignity. That's an inherent worthiness that is transcendent of all social and biological categories like race and class and gender and sexuality and age and ability, right? Just all those things, all those different things. We taught that all humans are in the image of the divine, right? Senen nature is the word, right? So I'm saying we don't come into the room naked and in need, but fully clothed in our own culture. But if we don't have that, we borrow from and ask Europe how to go forward. We said one of the most important things you have to do is to dialogue with your own culture, African culture, ancient and modern, continental and diaspora. Diaspora means scattered all around the world, but starting here with African American and also the Caribbean and South American, then the continent and Asia, etc., where Blacks are, borrow from the best of those traditions, right? And why do we say it's a crisis? Because it's a crisis of self-understanding, which affects self-assertion. For example, suppose we say, I'm free. Well, there's no freedom struggle. Suppose people say, I'm not Black. Then we can't have Black power. And we can't have reparations. We can't get anything because we just eliminated ourselves. So we have to understand ourselves. And if we understand ourselves, we get to our own history, and our history is our grounding. Haji Malcolm said, of all our studies, history is best prepared to reward our research. But sometimes Haji Malcolm collapses history and culture, right? Because history is at the center of culture, right? It's the first factor in culture, right? And history is the is the struggle and record of a people in the process of shaping their world in their own image and interest. It's a struggle with nature to make it an ally rather than an enemy. It's a struggle with other nations to keep them from oppressing us. It's a struggle with society in order that society is supposed to protect us, doesn't find itself enslaving us or segregating us and doing all those other things. Much of our history is resistant to that. And this is a struggle against ourselves, against diminished conception of ourselves, so that we can, Haji Malcolm said, come to ourselves. And he said, when you come to yourself, a lot of other things will come to you. One last point about the crisis and challenge. We also said, in terms of the cultural crisis, is that until we break the monopoly that the oppressor has on so many of our minds, liberation is not only impossible, it's unthinkable. And what you can't conceive, you can't achieve. And so we need culture. We need culture. We need to be grounded in our own culture so we can speak our own special culture truth and make our own unique contribution to how this society is reconceived and reconstructed. The messenger had a beautiful phrase I use a lot. He says, in our struggle, we want a new earth and a new us. I like that. I always like that. A new earth and a new us.
Okay.
That new us is a new culture us.
Yeah, so I thank Maulana for that. Dr. Fields, do you have a question? You're on mute.
Yeah. Actually, I'm just caught up in trying to process all of these issues, but I do have a question with respect to inculcating our children and our students along the same lines that you're speaking, Dr. Karenga. What are the initial steps we need to be grounded in? Because that culture, I mean, you talked about the family in your presentation being essentially an institution. That's how strong, I mean, that's what I received from it. So, what should we be doing step by step to make sure that we're grounding our children? Of course, many of us have to be freed from this Euro manner of thinking, but if you could walk us through that. And I know it's probably a rudimentary question, but it's something I think we need to go back to dealing with.
And I think it's very important, Brother Larry, that we not see these questions as rudimentary, but that we see them as depthful, impossible to avoid if we're going to build a good life we all want and deserve to live. And we are not talking to the choir. I know that's an easy phrase, and I'm not criticizing.
No, that's fine.
We're not talking to the choir. That's dismissive, because a lot of things people think they know, they don't know. And what they'll do is use something in African history as a reference rather than a resource. Everybody can use Nana Harriet Tubman as a reference. Oh, she did that. She saved some enslaved. But we don't know how to teach her as a resource. For what? What is she a resource for? First of all, with us, because we put an emphasis on knowledge, she is a thinker. She sees freedom as indivisible. She doesn't just get up one day and leave, right? That's just individual escape. She is cultivated by her father and mother, by the people that visit the plantation. She is sheltered by the people who wanted to succeed. She has $1 million bounty in today's money on her, and nobody turned her in. Just think about that. We got to talk about that. That's a resource. How do you build that kind of confidence in the people so they become your shield? That's real revolution right there. But she also defines freedom for us. She says, when I stepped across the line, I felt very good. The sun was shining, and it came through the trees and turned the leaves gold. And I felt like I was in heaven. But then all of a sudden, she said, I became sad because all the people I loved were still back there on the plantation. And I decided that day that I would go back and get them, that they would be free too. Why? Because she felt, rightfully so, freedom was indivisible. And at that moment, she redefined freedom from individual escape to the collective practice of self-determination in and for community. That was freedom. Not going up north, say, hey, I done made it. Y'all try to get yourself together. Come on afterwards, right? She could not see herself free except in the midst of her people. What a beautiful thought. That's using her as a resource rather than a reference to talk about the fundamental problems facing us. Now, the question of family. So we should talk about this. This is again, the nation, both from the messenger and Haji Malcolm, who influenced the movement. Anybody tell you that the nation, see, a lot of times people, because white people define who you should look at and who you think did something in the 60s, they forget. Without the nation, what kind of blackness would we have? What kind of conscience would we have, right? So we don't need to pretend that. We don't have to be Muslims to give Muslims credit, right? Yeah. This is intellectual history. I'm into intellectual history, so I'm going to study all our people, because that's what Kawaiti is, an ongoing synthesis of the best of African sensibility, thought, and practice in constant exchange with the world. So I want to learn the best of our thought, the best of our sensibilities, the best of our thought, the best of our practice. So now I'm coming out of college or university, and I'm asking, what can I do? It's like Dr. Mary McClever Thune said, knowledge is the prime need of the hour, but people want to know what you're going to do with your knowledge. And she said, it's up to us who have acquired that knowledge to discover the dawn and then share it with the masses of our people and our youth who need it more. She said our youth who need it, the mass of our people and our youth who need it more. And she says to us, don't destroy their zeal, but build on it and teach them to discipline that zeal. And so what I'm thinking now is, how do I help build family and community? So I create a holiday called Kwanzaa. First, I create the values. To be honest with you, the first thing I did is create the values, because I believe people needed values. I created the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of a Black value system. Y'all know them: Umoja, unity; Kujichagulia, self-determination; Ujima, collective working responsibility; Uchama, cooperative economic; neo-purpose; Kumba, creativity; and Imani, faith. And then I created the holiday to institutionalize and promote those values, right? And I created Kwanzaa then for several reasons. Number one, to contribute to the struggle, right? Second, to reaffirm our rootedness in African culture. And third, to give us a time when we as Africans could come together all over the world, reaffirm the bonds between us, and meditate on the awesome meaning of being African. And you know, more than any other time during the year, Black people all over the world, on every continent in the world, come together around Kwanzaa and meditate and talk about and dress for being African in the world. And then finally, I created Kwanzaa in order to introduce these values, this Nguzo Saba. We call them communitarian values, community values, values that stress and strengthen family, community, and culture. And that's what I call Kwanzaa, a celebration of family. I define Kwanzaa as a Pan-African holiday, which is a celebration of family, community, and culture. Family first. Now, what is the basis of family? We can easily say blood, but you know that doesn't work all the time. It has to be values also, right? And so we have social relatives and we have blood relatives. And the social relatives are those who share values with us, right? Those who want to see the world unfold in the way we do and is willing to work with us and care for us enough to help make it so. So that's where we make a distinction between community and neighborhood. Neighborhood is where we live. That's geographical space, but community is value and culture space. So we need to build culture communities, Brother Larry. We need to build culture communities, and we need to have schools that teach our people. Now, that's another thing we did, was build an African-American independent school, we used to call them. We still call them independent school. And there we teach the children the doctrine in child language. A lot of times people say, what's your message for the youth? I say, same one it is for the older people. Speak truth, do justice, all right? Be kind, do not be evil. Cherish and challenge the children. You have to do that. You have to cherish them, but you got to challenge them to learn. Children have a greater capacity for learning than older people. They can learn 2 or 3 languages at the same time. As you get older, you're not able to do it. And if you do it, you don't do it as fast. Rescue me if I'm wrong. So it's better for us to not pretend children can't learn even the most difficult things that you think, right? And then, what's so strange about this? Then Black people, well, not Black people, just everybody American. We're American by habit and African by choice, we say. So we got to choose every day to be African, right? So sometimes we represent America rather than Africa. And when I say Africa, I'm talking about us as Africans. I mean, we're not junior brothers. We're not continental Africans, that is to say, immediately coming from the continent, but instantly we came from the continent. So we don't lose our identity by taking a boat ride, right? But the European made us feel we had to get that up. So sometimes Black people still have trouble saying African American. They'd rather say Black American, right? You see? And that's a color American, but what's your culture? That's a nice one. I always use Black. Black is a struggle term, right? But a formal term for who we are has to be rooted in a culture, because all humans have a culture. Culture is a unique and equally valid and valuable way we're human in the world. Every people is a unique and equally valid and valuable way of being human in the world. And that's their culture. That's their culture. That's them. So teach your children, build schools, help support independent schools, right? Get involved in the PTA, help shape what your children learn in public school. Most of us are not going to be out of public school. We're going to be in public school. So we have to take space in there. And first time, like when the Latinos came, a lot of Black, I'm not anti-Latino, so I'm not going into that. But I'm just telling you that Black people a lot of times get afraid because they have numbers. But the white people outnumbered us, and they still outnumber all of the colored people together, right? But we didn't let that stop us. We challenged the dominant group. We resisted the tyranny of the majority. We have to do that again. And we have to make coalitions and alliance with Latinos, with Asians, with Native Americans, and with progressive white. But we must come, right? We must come fully clothed in our own culture. We must sit at the table independent. We can't be a satellite. And let me tell you this, there's history to be learned from written texts, but there's also history to be read from oral texts. And equally important, listen, not just written text, not just oral text, but also living practice texts. I learned from my mother and father and the way they act, the way they treated, the way they lived their lives, did their work, and waged their daily struggle to provide for us, to have a nice place to support their church and to, be a good sister and a good brother. I learned those values from them. So I don't know this until later. I mean, I have to do some searching afterwards, but this, I kind of long on that question. That was it, brother.
All right. Thank you, Maulana. Dr. Charles Alexander, Chicago, you want me to ask a question? He's part of the collaboration, Maulana.
Okay, good.
Yeah, well, him and Larry Fields.
Yes, sir. How you doing, sir?
I am well. Thank you, Baba Rahh, and thank you, Dr. Karenga.
Yes, both.
So my question is, did and does the Black Power concept teach, or does it exist at the expense of local, state, and national politics?
I wouldn't think so, Charles. I would think that it's at the core of practice for local, national, and even international initiatives. So we have to ask, what is Black power, right? So first, I told you what we defined it as in struggle. It is the collective struggle of a people to achieve and secure three main goals. First, self-determination. Now, on the local level, what does that mean? Controlling the space we occupy. In every community we are, controlling that space, controlling the institutions, controlling the land. We have to fight for that. Look at what gentrification is doing to pushing us out, destroying our culture centers, right? So we have to have self-determination. We have to have our representatives in the different legislative and governmental forms, and we have to be organized. I was just doing an international conference in Ghana, virtually, of course, and one of the things I said for the Pan-Africanism is that that the people have to be at the center of their own life, that no program is worth its name that does not only provide people with the means to satisfy human needs, but helps to transform them in the process, making them self-conscious agents of their own life and liberation. And that must be our goal. For I said, there is no substitute for an aware, organized, and engaged people constantly involved in a multiplicity of activities to define, defend, and advance their interests on the local level, Charles, on the national level, and on the international level. So I take it. Now, what is power? What is this thing we call power? Because usually when the white man talks about power, he talks about control of people, power over rather than power with. But if we talk African, we got to talk about power with and power for. Do it for the good, power for the good, not over anybody. And that's why our culture is so beautiful, because right here now, before I can go on with power, I need to share with you this beautiful verse from the sacred text, the Odu Ifa, the sacred text of our ancestors, the Yorubas, ancient Yoruba. It says, let's do things with joy, for surely humans have been divinely chosen to bring good into the world. And that's, we say in Kawida, that's the fundamental mission and meaning of human life. What a beautiful concept that everybody is chosen, not just one group, but everybody is chosen. And they're chosen not over and against anyone, but chosen with everyone to do what? To bring good into the world and not let any good be lost. So whether you're a judge or a journalist, a doctor, a lawyer, right? A farmer or a pharmacist, a student or a teacher, you take your life, your goal, your vocation, and use it to do what? Bring good into the world. So power, so let's go back to power, because you're think about political power. And the Yoruba word for government. So there's a verse, 78:1, that talks about how you bring good into the world. And one of the things it says is you have to have wisdom adequate to govern the world. And the word for govern is not to control people. The word akoso means to gather people together for good ends. And the word session in ancient Egyptian means to rightly guide, right, the people, right? Not to control them, but to rightly guide the people, right? And base it on ma'at. Ma'at means rightness and goodness in the world, right? The fundamental principle of which the Creator created the world. So what is power now? Power is the ability to realize your will. Now, in a context of struggle, it's the ability to realize your will even in the face of opposition. The ability to realize. So when we talk about power in America, we mean power to realize our will even in the face of opposition. That's what we need. And that means, Charles, that's local, national, and international. Again, I might have been a little long on that, but
No, that was awesome. One more question, Baba Rahh.
Go ahead.
And so, are we limited are we limited to some degree or at all? Are we limited by our challenges to reach out and work and network with our brothers and sisters in the diaspora and have more of an internationalist purview?
No, I don't think it about more than internationalists than black people in this country. I mean, we're the ones who are the origin of Pan-Africanism itself.
Mm.
And the messenger used to talk, see, like people don't want, again, the people don't want to give the messenger, the nation, no credit, you know, they want to think only the Marxists talk internationalism, you know. Hey, I mean, you know, Dr. Mary McClellan, I should say Nana, Dr. Mary was a Pan-Africanist. I mean, she thought about the world. You know what she said? Our task is to remake the world. It is nothing less than this. Imagine saying that in the 30s or the 20s. I mean, nobody came and told you, you know what, you need to know about the world. Hey, we got to stop letting white people define what we're doing. One of the greatest powers in the world, here's power again. One of the greatest powers in the world is a power to define reality and make others accept it, even when it's to their disadvantage and contributes to their own oppression. And so, what is this thing called internationalism? I tell our white leftist friends and our black leftist friends, I'm a leftist, but I'm not a Marxist leftist. I'm a Kawaida leftist, right? That means radical, right? I'm part of the black radical tradition, right? Black revolutionary tradition. You know, we're descendants of Nat Turner, Nana Nat Turner, and Nana Denmark Vesey, Nana Gabriel, and Nana Prosser, right? So I think it's important for us to think like that. So I think it's important for us to see that there is no nationalism without the nations that make it up. So I start with a nation so I can do what? Relate to other nations. And that's called nationalism. If I erase myself and become an anonymous ethnic, hey, how do I even sit down at the table as an equal with other nations of the world? I'm not coming to the table as a junior brother. I don't even do that. I come to the table fully clothed in my own culture, able to speak my own special culture truth, make our own unique contribution to how this world is reconceived and reconstructed.
Brother Reginald Muhammad?
Yes, Professor Rahh, and to the entire audience on the Zoom, and to Dr. Karenga and others who made this night special. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're grateful and appreciative.
Thank
and Dr. Karenga, we're in Atlanta, Georgia, and
Hey.
I have not seen you for over 25 years since LA, and I never took a class from yours, but I'm a student of yours over the last 40 years, and I thank you, appreciative. Dr. Karenga, you will know this quote: "The struggle for reparations begin with the definition of the horrendous injury to African people, which demands repair. To talk reparations is to first identify and define the injury, to say what it is and to say what it is not, and to define the nature and the impact on the ones. Unless this is done first and maintained throughout the process, there is no case for reparations, only an incoherent set of claims without the basis in ethics or law." Dr. Karenga. Introduction to Black Studies. Dr. Karenga, thank you.
Thank you for the quote.
Dr. Karenga, I want to let you know that we're being honest. We're utilizing that quote in the book, the reparations, the National Reparations Declaration. And you have seen that the reparations movement now is coming full circle now. After all the years of struggle, it's mainstream all over the world now. And again, we thank you, Dr. Karenga. You're here to hear. A lot of times we don't thank our elders and those scholars who have contributed to our work until after they're gone. And so I'm thankful to Professor Rahh and all of those who made this happen tonight. And honestly, I will make sure my students at the AU Center listen to this over and over and over, and I will encourage others, because this interview tonight filled in a lot of blanks that I had, and I'm sure others had, brother. And again, we thank you for your time, because You have been a very valuable work in the reparations movement. And Dr. Karenga, if you would consider too, because following your instructions, we came with a hopefully a precise definition of reparations. And if you at least consider it and give us your critique or criticism at some time.
I'd be glad to. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Professor Rahh, my brother, my friend. Brother Rahh, what I owe Brother Rahh, it can never be estimated. I mean, Brother Rahh was a strong friend of mine when I first came to Cal State Long Beach. He got me my job there, kept me there. When the white boy kept me away for 7 years, Professor Rahh and I and Tim Moyo, we just fought every day. Professor Rahh was every day, and finally I got back after 7 years. I left as a lecturer. I returned as the chair of the department, and in 1 year I'd gotten my full professorship. So I got a lot of respect for and love for my brother Rahh, and I just admire him. And I like. Let me finish. I got to do this. And I just like. I like how consistent he was been, because people try to murder mouth and all that, but he didn't even take all that. He just went on and say, what is there to be done? How do we do it? And we built a friendship and comradeship, co-combatants in the struggle in service of our people. And that was so important to me. So I'm forever grateful to Professor Rahh, and I just wanted to say that and make sure this is important.
You must be kind, Maulana, but people got to understand, we were in the struggle in 60s, 65. So I know what you contributed and the organization, us, during the 1965 movement and Black Power movement. And regardless of what people were saying, to many of the people in the community, you were a hero. And your organization was well respected and disciplined. And people would always borrow from your intellectual role of writing or helping them organize. I was there. So you came to campus, and all them people talking like crazy stuff. they weren't in the struggle. So they don't know the truth. And they don't know how COINTELPRO tried to diminish the righteous leaders and organizations of our movement. So when you came to Cal State Long Beach, and when I met you, you, Timoya, Tangalifu, at that time, Wasifu, and I think Chimbuka was with us. And we was walking up the way, and you had to perform a lecture to get hired. And after that, I was with the Culture Center forever. You understand? Sounded like Malcolm. And all the Black leaders combined together, because you referenced all of them. It was just a beautiful experience. So asante for that. But that's one of the reasons I stand by you today and forever, is because your contribution. Even Merv Diamond, his political institute at Cal State Dominion, we met on La Brea. And he stood up and said you were one of the best minds of the Black movement. Sister Barbara Skinner said you reminds us of being African all the time. Molefi Osante was so impressed, he wrote a book about you. And he's one of the most esteemed scholars with regards to starting the first PhD at Temple University. And I think he's still chair. But Molefi comes out here for Kwanzaa, speak at the Kwanzaa. It's just a beautiful thing.
He's another one of my best friends. So, I have a lot of respect for him. He's strong, and he doesn't move, and we need that. See, one of the things that Black men, and really, one time we need to talk about how Black men can be rebuilt again, because Black men are suffering from lack of presence. They don't even feel they have the right of presence, right? And this is something that's real important for us to deal with. But I want to answer Brother Reginald's question. I want to do that, Professor Rahh, but I want to tell you, yes, reparations mean to repair, right? And in the largest sense, it is to repair a gross and grievous injury. And that's why it's so important to ask yourself, what is that injury? So if we talk about and want to like a short, concise definition. It is repair of a gross and grievous injury, and therefore, one, a quest for justice for the injured people, accountability from the oppressor, and a model for how you treat those who have been grossly injured. And it has several basic aspects to it if we're going to do it right. And that's why I really am apprehensive, Black people, of several things about the reparation movement. And one of the things I think is that we haven't spent enough time talking about what it is. Second, I think the European is going to dime and nickel us to death and give us separate solutions, some from the university, some from the city, some from the state, right? But most of them, and some from the corporations, but most of them want to give us much less than we deserve.
That's right.
It has to be a national collective project. And I'll talk to you about it in a minute. Now,
yes,
what are the steps we go through? The first step is a public and communal dialogue to define the injury. Because sometimes people just say, you owe me my money, but for what? Oh, you treated me bad. Well, but it has to be more precise than that. One of the greatest injuries you can commit is the Holocaust of enslavement. That's the first and foremost injury. The other injuries come from that, right? By Holocaust, I mean a morally monstrous act of genocide that is not only against the targeted people themselves, but also a crime against humanity. And we've got to talk like that, think like that. We've got to take time, not to simply say, I want my check. Now, my co-chair in the BCCLA, the Black Community Clergy Left, like Miss Jackie Wright, she always said, Maulana, you got to talk about the check. So, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for her. I have a lot of respect for her. So, yeah, we need the money, right? We need money, cash money. That's what she always said. We do need cash money. But you know what else? We need to know we got to have more than cash money, because we get cash money with the lotto. Where does it go?
Back.
We got a lot of, what do you call those people? Celebrities that get millions of dollars, and before you know it, they don't have it.
That's right.
I just want us to have the values for it, and I want us to make sure that everybody gets some. So we got to discuss that. So the first thing was to have this discussion about it. Got the public. And the public dialogue is so the white man can stop denying what he did to us, right? And so we can tell him and speak truth to him after we've spoken truth to ourselves. Speak truth to the people first, then speak truth to power. Second, we need an acknowledgement that the injury is Holocaust. Not slavery, not slave trade, but Holocaust. Why am I choosing that? Slave trade is an economic consideration. Business gone bad with collateral damage. Slavery itself looks like a natural condition. And okay, we grew out of it, we don't do it anymore. No, we got to have a little bit more here. This is Holocaust. And by Holocaust, I mean the morally monstrous destruction of human life, human culture, and human possibility. Millions killed. We don't even know how many. Just think about it. We know it's more than 6 million, right? So it's a lot. The death of one human being, the destruction of one human being is a tragedy. What about tens of millions? Second, the moral monstrous destruction of human culture. Destruction of our great works of art, our literature, our music, and the people who made the culture. Great cities and towns, because the oppressor had the capacity to do it and didn't have the moral restraint not to. The moral and monstrous destruction of human possibility, lifting us out of our own history and culture and making us a footnote forgotten casualty in here, making us an object of labor, sex, and entertainment, and putting that on us until it works even today. Rescue me if I'm wrong, right? So that's destroying. He's even destroyed our relationship with other people. People be calling us an N-word, they don't even know us. People having stereotypic conceptions of us from this experience with the European here.
Yes,
So
sir.
we have to have him to acknowledge that it's Holocaust as a major injury. Then after that, segregation, the savagery of segregation. And third, ongoing racism. Those three injuries, right? The historical and then the ongoing. Then the third thing we need is acknowledgement, okay? I'm sorry, we had an acknowledgement, apology. Now, people say, I don't need no apology. Well, I don't need it either, but he needs to do it because in the system that we have, that's part of concession that you did it because he's lying. That's a way to get him to confess it and to show some humanity for having done it. And guess who has to do it? The state. By the state, I mean the federal government. Why? It established the enslavement. It protected it with army and navy and vigilante and patrols, right? With laws, legalized. And then, of course, we have recognition, public recognition. We need to teach it in the schools. Now we teach a Jewish Holocaust that happened in Europe. We don't even teach Native American Holocaust. The Native American maybe lost in the whole America is 100 million. In this country, at least 16 million. When the European came here by conservative estimates, that's 15 to 16 million. By 1850, 1800, there was 500,000 Native Americans left. Can you imagine that? Killing 15 million people. And we don't start history with that. We start with the white man coming like nothing matters until he gets here to kill everybody. Call him the Wild Wild West. He's the wild one. It wasn't wild before he got here, So I just think it's very important for us to be able to get that on the record and for us to teach this real history. And you can see how the white man don't want to teach it. He'll burn a book in a minute, make a law to outlaw teaching Black studies, right? He don't want to face what he has done to us, let alone what he's done to the Native American, because they fought at least 100 years before we even got here. Rescue me if I'm wrong, right? So I just think it's very important for us to have this recognized, teach the horror, the gross immorality of this. And its meaning not only to us in this country, but to the world. Now, finally, we get to compensation. People be jumping all those other steps, and they go right to compensation.
That's right.
Go right to money. And I'm saying there are different ways to compensate. I like free education, but also I would like for Black people to get their land back. You know what I mean? All the stolen land that they had. It's a lot of things, free health care, right? So I think it's very important for us to have a communal conversation about how we're going to do that. Also, in this compensation, we got to discuss. I don't think Oprah Winfrey would need the compensation. Anybody here want to raise their hand and think she will? Say. So we've got to ask ourselves, how do we distribute this? But if we don't ever get it in the collective pile, it's nickel and diming.
That's right.
What's happening? And then also the next point, the fifth one, sixth point is, guess what? Building of projects, institutions to prevent this happening again. People might think it won't happen again, but look at what they do to the Muslims. When the crisis came, they saw, after 9/11, putting Muslims in captivity, no habeas corpus, nothing. Mama can't see him, the lawyer can't see him, Papa can't see him, nobody can see him. And they waterboarding, all that kind of stuff. You never thought that would happen, but it did. Well, they did it with the Japanese, of course, as you know.
Yes, sir.
And then finally, the seventh thing that we need to do is, of course, struggle to make this real. So we can never talk just about reparations. That's my last point on that. We can never just talk about reparations outside of the struggle. Reparations are part and parcel of the struggle, but it's not as strong as it should be. I almost said not valid, but I would say it's not as strong as it ought to be if it's not part of the struggle.
Yes, sir.
Asante Maulana. I just got a couple more questions. We're gonna let you go because we know you got other issues. Brother
Can I
Charles,
can I ask one quick follow-up question?
yes. Go ahead, Brother Phil.
Dr. Karenga, you know, there are competing schools on who should receive reparations. In identifying and defining these things, who should the parties be that receive reparations?
Now, I think you're talking about the conversation whether or not continental Africans that just got here or Caribbean Africans that just got here, whether they should get in a bit of that.
That's correct. You're right. ADOS, you know, only descendants.
I didn't want to mention people's names so I can make. See, one of the things I know what you mean, though. Asante for that. Thanks so much, Charles. I appreciate that. The reason I didn't say it, you know I know it.
Yes, sir. I know you know.
I don't want to argue against the organization. I want to argue against the ideas, right?
Yes,
that's a very important thing. Like sometimes I'm gonna make a critique of the Panthers, I won't mention their name. I'll just say this is what I believe, because it's not just them, it's the idea, right? Or if I want to make a criticism of the nation, even I wouldn't say the nation, I would just say the idea, because it's not the organization in itself. It's the idea that we've got to deal with, because people are so committed to structures and to people, they won't listen if you mention the name, right? So I'm just saying, in order to build what I call operational unity, I'm sure all of y'all have heard of that. I introduced that in the 60s. Operational unity means unity in diversity, unity without uniformity, unity in principle, purpose, and practice, right? So now, going back to who should get the reparations. All Africans should get the reparations, but in this country, you have to privilege African Americans, older African Americans. Otherwise, you don't really rightfully recognize what they suffered in here, and you don't face the fact that in Africa, on the continent, in the Caribbean, they have their own reparations program. And so that's what needs to be done, an international reparations, where we don't even have to have this conversation. But if we have national reparations project, then the nation that was there, that built itself, that suffered, that went through it, I don't know if we cannot give them priority. Second, I think if we are just, and if we try to show concern for our sisters and brothers that have just arrived, because they've taken up a new place, then they need some money also. They need some compensation. But the privileging has to be, if I went to Jamaica, the Jamaicans got their reparation. You know, I know that. Have you seen the Caribbean list of demands for reparations? They have about 10 things. But we're not into that. We're not there. And I don't even feel bad about that, because I know these are national projects, and I do believe in an international project, but we're not there yet. That's what I was saying. But I'm open to the discussion. I'm not going to cuss over it or talk bad to nobody, and call them mama out or nothing. You know what I mean? I'm not even into that.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Y'all see that? You can't dismiss. And one of the things, let me just tell you this last thing. One of the things that I said in the early 80s, when we were building Black studies, is that the white people, and it doesn't mean the Continental goes along with it. Some do and some don't. The white man will fight and get a project, and the white man will overlook us as African Americans and support the Caribbean and the Continental. I'm just telling you the reality. They're not going to divide me. I don't feel negative toward them. They're our brothers. And I want to tell you this. I need you to see this, because if you see this, you'll understand how committed I am to the whole of African people, the world African community. When the white man, see, that's why I differ with these other arguments, because they don't take into consideration that I was taken, my mother and father, and especially like my paternal grandfather, he was born during the Holocaust of enslavement. I got a big family, right? And his father was born in the Holocaust of enslavement. Those people that were taken, my people, your people, were taken from families in Africa. The Holocaust is a shared experience of all Africans, wherever they are. If they're in Japan, the Holocaust of enslavement, of colonialism, of imperialism, was a shared injury to all of us. They took us from a family, the family law. The Navy tried to say they sold you. No, we got to make a distinction between three groups in this, the Holocaust. Perpetrators, the white man. I know people don't say this much more than enslaver, okay? But, you know, and I know it's white people that introduced this. You know, that was domestic enslavement, but it was a different kind. And we're talking about the thing that brought us to this country, right? Okay. Now, you had the perpetrators that come and force the people into their system and bribe and manipulate. Second, there's the collaborators. We don't need to say there were no collaborators. Yeah, there was collaborators. But the third group are the people. And nobody says, I want to come to America, right? Enslave me. I love y'all white people. Teach me the way to live. That's a dishonor to us, to let white people convince you that your mother and your father sold you. So make a distinction between the perpetrators and the collaborators. And when we talk about collaborators, remember there's collaborators in every oppression. For example, in the Jewish Holocaust, there were Jews that sold each other out. There was a capos in the camps that beat the people and treated them in the worst kind of way. But you know who was really serious was the Judenrat. That's German for the Jewish Council. They actually rounded up Jews and put them on the transport to take them to the camps. And the Jews don't talk much about that. Why? Because Hitler is the enemy. And I don't talk much about the collaborator because the white enslaver is the enemy. The Holocaust, the genocidist person, the genocidist, that's the main person for me. I won't deny the collaborators, but I don't want to mix that up with the people. Don't mix them up with the victim. Keep in mind, I'm going to do this one last time. There's the perpetrator, there's the collaborator, and then there's the victim. That's who I defend. That's who I speak up for.
Asante, Maulana. Asante. Just a couple more questions, Maulana, if you don't mind.
I got time. I
Okay.
set aside this for you, Brother Rahh.
You
I'm
must
here all night. You tell me I need you.
We used to do that all night.
We used to do that.
Yeah, no teaching.
So that's real.
All right, Dr. Shabaka, do you have any questions? You're on mute. You're on mute, Dr. Shabaka.
Okay. Parigani Maulana.
Parigani, Dr. Shegun Shabaka.
Asante, Professor Rahh, for this. I want to go back, Maulana, and I want you, Dafadali, to take us inside the conference, those Black Power conferences. What were they like? What are some of the key organizations that participated? What were those numbers like? Because I've read a few articles, and then I want you to refer us to some articles and books where we can get firsthand information about the conferences, because we hear Black Power people talking about Black Power, but we don't know that there were conferences and there were people that organized around this concept.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that book with Charles, what? The brother who was the PR man, Shahid in Samaji. What was his name? He was at North Carolina for Chuck Stone. Chuck Stone. His book, he talks about how many cities was there, how many different groups were there. I could get those figures for you, but I don't remember right at the top of my head, but it was hundreds of there, right? And from different cities, many different cities.
Yeah, I think there were a few thousand people
that he wrote.
In terms of
talked about in
attendance,
one-
yeah, it was over 1,000, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Hundreds of organizations. Yeah. So those are some very powerful numbers.
Yes,
know?
it is. It is. People wanted to do structure. And that's why I got the charge from the conference to go to Newark and try out building Black political power, which led to not only Black people in Newark for the first time occupying those council seats in great numbers, but also electing the first Black mayor. And in the 90s, Donald Tucker, and I've always had a lot of respect for him. He and the other city people called me back there to give me an award for helping to organize that. We went back there, our organization, us. We went back there. We have organized, we created the campaign called the Peace and Power Campaign for the election. We also named the structure and organized that with Amiri Baraka. This was the Committee for Unified Newark. We helped train the security as well as the precinct walkers and the organizers. So it was a good project. It was a good project, and it led to the election of a lot of city council people, and then finally the mayor. Mhm. Yeah, so that was good. That one. Then it went into 68 was in Philadelphia, and that was a large one too. It was held at the Church of the Advocate, I think, Church of the Advocate. Maisha, was that the name of Father? What was Father's last name? It was a progressive church, right? It was a progressive church, and we had almost as many people as we had in Newark. Might more, because people were deep into it. Those were strong days. Some of the committees were economic committee, political committee, the religious committee, the culture committee. Those are fundamental committees that we had. But we had, we had an anti-war committee and draft committee. There's so many committees, but everything that was important. And in fact, Gary kind of duplicated, because Gary also was informed by Kawaida as well, the people that went there, a lot of them. And there was more, what do you call it? I don't want to say establishment. More BEOs, Black elected officials, and more people involved in U.S. politics there at that time. And that was a big division there in terms of where we were supposed to go. But Garrett's statement is a very important statement, the Garrett Convention statement. I was in captivity at the time, but my philosophy was there. I was a victim, but I'm a survivor and a constant resistor of the FBI COINTEL program. Of course, they put me in captivity on trumped up charge, hacked 4 years out of my life. And I thought they would break me, but of course, I got out. The day I got out, I had a meeting right down from the prison. So I'm not stopped. I'm not deterred, And as I said in an interview while I was in there, the Times, a sister from the Times interviewed me. I said, you can't expect to oppose the established order and not expect them to come for you. They will come for you. The question is, can you not only survive that, but develop afterwards?
Asante, Maulana. Asante for that. I'm going to ask Tia Moya. Did you, Saber Tia Moya of the organization, do you have any questions?
Asante Sana, Professor Rahh. I was always interested in how the women were so involved in the Black Power conferences. I know we took part in so much of the building, and when we all went to Philadelphia, it was such a striking response and organization. And I always wanted to know the kind of discussions that were held in the major committees, because when they came out and they started, everything was just so well structured and organized, and it was such a sense of unity and power that it just was overwhelming. It was just like so full in the hallways, outside, everywhere, that I wanted to ask Saber Maulana, in terms of the women, I see them all involved, but I never actually knew what they were actually doing, because I was involved in a different part, you know, so I would like to ask you that, Saber Maulana.
And what was that, Timothy?
In terms of the women's involvement, you know, like in the structure of the committee work, because when y'all came out, it was so powerful and it was all unified, and as soon as you came out, everybody was together with it. Y'all had worked it out. It was just so meticulous. And I think I had found one document, I don't know where it is now, but it actually was a typed version of what was done and said at that conference before y'all came out. And it was afterwards, but it was so strong, and I didn't see any disunity or anything. There was real brotherhood and sisterhood involved.
This, are you talking about the conference? Oh, yeah, in Philadelphia. Okay. There were women on all the committees, and women did work. A lot of times, you know, we were sexist and chauvinist, men were sexist and chauvinist, so women didn't get a lot of credit. But actually, as I was teaching the other day on another interview, the women saved our organization, because when the white man came, the FBI, they drove us underground. We had to go into exile and, of course, put us in captivity on Trump charge. So that left the women. And the women seamlessly moved into place and kept the organization going, even forming a security organization of themselves. We had the Simba for the men, but they formed the Matamba, which is, of course, named after the people, the nation of Queen Nzinga. And they had, you know, warrior women. And so, and they were, even in our own organization, on every committee except the Simba committee. And of course, as I said, eventually they formed their own. He just thought that, you know, the revolution was going to be a quick thing, and we'd get into the White House painted black and start ordering, giving executive orders, that kind of stuff. You know, we had ideas about unlimited capacity. And that's what makes revolutions, though, you know, when people lose this kind of fervor, and they go home and watch TV, get drunk, or do something else that's diverting. So they have that zeal that they open doors, ways for a new world.
I'm just go a couple more questions. Saber Chimbuku, you have a question?
Yebo, I sure do, Professor Rahh. Asante Sana.
Yebo.
Yebo, Asante Sana for that. It's been an excellent program. Appreciating all that you've taught and shared with us, Saber Maulana, if I understood you correctly. I wanted to go back to when you were talking about our primary identity being that we are Black.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about, you know, there's current conversations that says that, well, we have many identities, and that we can't privilege Black because the experiences and the possibilities of, let's say, an unemployed, working class, uneducated Black woman versus a college-educated, upper middle class Black man. They both are Black, but those other identities that they have are just as important, or maybe more so, because they have different possibilities and totally different experiences based on those other identities, so that Black is not necessarily primary, it's just one of many identities that we have. And how would you respond to that, Dr. Karenga?
Well, you can see, aside from that, appreciate what you said, if I understand correctly, if Black is not the primary identity, we don't have anything to talk about. I said the same thing to LGBT people, the same thing. If that's your identity, you could have that conversation with Chicanos, Latinos in general, Latina. You can have the conversation with Asians, white people, Native Americans, right? But if you want a conversation with me and you want to talk about basic things, that's our unity. If we don't have that, what do we have? Also, if you don't think you're Black, or if you think that's just one of identity, why doesn't that work with the police? Why doesn't it work with the employment possibilities, right? That's not so. The reality is that the world knows you by Blackness. And then all the other things come unto that. You think the white man is concerned about whether you're a woman or a man, right? Or whether you're gay, or whether you're bisexual, or trisexual or trans, you think that if he sees black, that's it? You think he's going to shoot you less if you got a college education? What is this? We have these conversations because we're uncomfortable. When have you heard a white ethnic talk about they don't want to be who they are? Okay, let's take the most known white person, the Jews. Suppose they came up and said, well, that's just one of my identities. Well, you know, why do you even have that? I'm telling you, black, regardless of what they say, black is our primary identity. We were black before we were born, we used to say in the 60s. That's how we came out here, right? And black is not just an identity, it's a destiny. It defines who we are. That is why the Black Power people, say, for example, the Black theologian, liberation theologian, the dean of the dean of Black liberation theology, Dr. James Cone, says, I'm born from Dr. Karenga, Maulana Karenga. He said, I'm born from Maulana Karenga. I take this as my starting point for my theology. Black is our ultimate reality. These other ones are secondary identities, and you don't have to put them down or anything, but that's how we know you. If you come into the Hekalu as a black person, you can be anything else you want. But if you're not black, you get a different reception in our place and theirs, and in everybody else's. And also, this is strange about people. Why claim black at all? You got all these other identities. What is the value of black? Why do you try to deconstruct it? Why don't you deconstruct those other identities? In fact, you build a case for those other identities. You put them first. You privilege them. And you know why that is, though, right? Not rooted real deep in your own culture, right? Because black culture contains all those differences, right? Black culture contains all of it. There's not a different kind of person in the world that black culture doesn't have, black people don't have. Raise your hand if you know something that black people don't have that other humans have. So I just think we are insecure in our identity as black people. And that shows up even with radical talking black people. You'll never hear me explain away black. I'm starting with that. If you want a good conversation with me, you start with that too.
Santi, Dr. Karenga, that's excellent. Santi Sada.
Brother,
And, can I say something? And I'm a keeper of the tradition. My last name is Karenga, and Karenga means keeper of the tradition, right? I'm going to be into the culture regardless. And nobody can tell me that our culture is not what I know it is. It is the most ancient, the richest for me, and the most revealing. There's nothing more beautiful to me than to learn about our culture, to get up in the morning at 5 and read in my own languages, right? To do interpretation, hermeneutics, right? To engage in interpretive practice that expand our conception of who we are and what we ought to be. And that teaches us and reaffirms there is no people more holy or chosen than our own. No history or narrative more sacred than our own or worthy of being taught or told. And no culture richer or more ancient and more revealing and more full of possibilities than our own. I got proof.
Brother Jerry Christmas.
Who's that?
Yeah, he's on mute.
I just had to come out. I've been waiting and then couldn't get to the mute button. Dr. Karenga, it's a pleasure. Boy, have I enjoyed this conversation. I didn't think I was gonna get to ask a question, and I just been enjoying the conversation. I'm coming out of St. Louis, and we have a rites of passage program at Central Baptist Church. We've been doing it going on 30 years now. And our rites of passage is with middle school boys and girls meeting on every other Saturday. And we've done it, consistently, except through COVID. We had breaks through COVID because just dealing with COVID. But the principles of our program is based on the Nguzo Saba. So that's what we are constantly going over with the children, the principles, learning the principles of Kwanzaa and then practicing Kwanzaa up until my mother passed. We'd always have a big Kwanzaa. Well, I've done it some years after. Once again, with COVID, we stopped doing the Kwanzaa as much. We've only done it twice, but I was just thinking I was going to do Kwanzaa this year. And then I for sure going to do it now, but it was already on my mind before I had this conversation. But, it's just fantastic. My question for you so much, because I've been trying to write it down and listen, I know it's tape, but I'm going to go back and get it, but I wanted to write some stuff down before I forgot it because I just want to read back over it again. You mentioned the N-word, and the N-word bothers me tremendously because when you talk about consciousness and culture and color, it's like, how are we going to get to that point if we constantly, using this N-word to degrade ourselves publicly? And it just seems like it consistently, and it's not just a word, it just seems like it's a whole way of acting in a culture. Like, can I hear you comment on that and just the way we use it and talk to each other with it?
Yeah, well, appreciate what you've asked, Joe, if I understand correctly. Thanks for the question. It is, as you know, an inheritance from the Holocaust of enslavement, where the European took away our ethnic and national names and made us just one body of objects of labor, objects of sex, and objects of entertainment. And so what he wanted us to do is to forget our identities. And so he cultivated historical amnesia. He actually literally opened up our mind and poured the filth of his weak thinking and savage feelings in us. And we have been struggling to escape that ever since. And so that is why I say we are American by habit and African by choice. We have to choose to be African every day. People say, I don't need to study black. I'm black. I know it from experience, right? That's confusing what we call knowing and being, epistemology with ontology. We know and be, knowing and being are two different things. A tree is a tree doesn't mean it knows that it's a tree, right? Even a lion might not know he or she is a lion in that same way. Rescue me. That's why we have schools. Every society has schools. If you just knew what you knew because you, hey, we don't need no school. We don't need no teaching, right? Now, so one of the greatest powers, as I said earlier, in the world is the power to define reality and make others accept it, even for it is to their disadvantage and contributes to their own oppression. And what word more does that or demonstrates that than the N-word? So people say, hey, I just call my homie that, right? I use the analogy I always say, that's like putting blue in the toilet bowl and pretending it's good drinking water. There's some things you can't clean up, right? You can't clean the N-word up. And you can tell you don't feel that way, that it's a good homie word, because if you're a Christian, you don't call Jesus that. Just like you can't justify itch with a B in front of it, you don't call Mary that. There's some words that you know are out of line. That's why you can't use them, right? So what happens here is that the European teaches people to accept their degradation. And what is a greater power of an enslaver or an oppressor than making people accept their own degradation, domination, and deprivation. You don't even have to be present, and they will act as you have taught them to be. You know, our great educator, Dr. Carter G. Woodson say, you know, teach a guy to go to the back door. If he goes there and he don't find one, he'll ask that it be cut so he can go to it. That's the N-word people, right? And I'm telling you, you can't be, it's, you know, and another thing I tell people, you can tell this is not a good word for you because you don't like the white man calling you that, right? So you're telling me you want to be in sometime, but not all the time. That's like turning a trick and pretending you're not a prostitute because you just do it sometime. You know? So the reality is that you've got to be able to define yourself. What is one of the first things the 7 principles calls for? The first thing is you got to be unified, because without other people, you can't even measure yourself. We are mirrors to each other and models. Models to emulate, mirrors by which we measure ourselves. That's the ancestors and each other. But the second principle is kujichagulia, self-determination. And how does that start? To define ourselves, right?
Mhm.
To name ourselves, right?
Mhm.
To create for ourselves and to speak for ourselves. So the two things that we're talking about now, to name ourselves, pardon me, to define ourselves and name ourselves is at the very beginning of learning the 7 principles and practice them. So, and how do we define ourselves? Accepting dignity, affirming life enhancing way. How do we name ourselves? In the same dignity, affirming, life enhancing, and world preserving way. And the N word is not dignity affirming, it's not life enhancing, and it's certainly not world preserving of anybody's world except the oppressors.
Asante Maulana. First of all, I want to tell everyone online, I wish I could get to all the questions on all the people, but we can't. But I got one more, maybe 2 more. Brother Chihuahua Ogozi, he's on our team as a part of the Community Education Network. Do you have a question? I think he's in Atlanta too. Go ahead.
Greetings. I am delighted to once again be in the presence of this illustrious living ancestor, you know?
Wait a minute. That's something there, Brother Chihuahua. I'm just living, okay?
You are a living ancestor, my brother. And I just wanted to say, when you speak of having control and the movement, I'm going to try to be as swift as I can.
Take your time.
The movement of the 60s that brought you into the mix of our liberation, the Black Power movement, which resulted in Kwanzaa and our people having something that is, you know, beneficial to them, that is not only for today, but for the generations, is highly appreciated and appreciated loved. All right. When you spoke about control back in the 60s, I came here in the early 60s, towards middle 60s. And the mainstream media, the media that Black folks had at that time, was either the streets, the church, the university campuses, and the entertainment world. And might have been a couple that I've missed, but as far as the mainstream media, like television, radio, et cetera, we really weren't involved in that too tough more than to be used. And then you speak of we have to control. So now our communities, what has happened in my opinion at this time is that the Black community has been moved into what you call a virtual world, the world of the digital age right now. So what we call it Black community as being an area where a high percentage of Black people, let's say 90–95% of Black people actually reside. We call it Black community, but the community has been shifted because of the technology. And now everybody's on social media, and that's really where the Black communities existed at this time. So that's one. And the next point is the faculty, when you talk about value, you are 1,000,000% on point, because value and power go together. And in order to have value and to have power, our people have to have their faculty 100% under their control. And that's their mind, body, and their soul, spirit, flesh, self. They must return within their true residency, which is within the body. And the system of the 60s, the offsprings of those marauders are now here, and they have made it a point to make sure that we never re-enter our faculty, because when we are in 100% control of our faculty, we have access to all the power of our ancestors and foreparents, and we ourselves become an updated updated form of the same display of all those that came before us, and we become more and more powerful. So I love you, my brother. Thank you, your presence and the work that you have done. And that's one of the things that the 7 principles of Kwanzaa is one of the things that I also live by, in my life as a Black man in America, in this world.
All
so
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Brother Kwamina from Chicago. Brother Kwamina, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Dr. Maulana, a lot of these people are not, it's my fault. They don't say who they represent. This brother's doing excellent work on dissecting the rap songs, the vulgar ones, and that they're playing to our children, and he's just doing excellent work in that. And he's just an excellent brother, and he's a relative of our brother that came out here. God, these medications get me.
Geronimo.
Yeah, well, Jaga, Pratt. Yeah. That's his relative. Go ahead,
okay.
Yeah, it's interesting growing up a Cub, and then my father hooked up with the sister who was in us organization, Majadi, and then we had a naming ceremony when I was little for Sister Kicheku, and I remember Jabu was there, Maisha, Heshimu, Brother Sagidi, and I got my first African name from Brother Sagidi. I took a liking to him, and so yeah, my daddy's name was Razuli, so that was kind of interesting how I had that dual piece growing up. And we still deal with Kwanzaa here in Gary. We've been doing it for a while. Our group, with the United African Movement, we put it on. As a matter of fact, when you talked about the 72 convention, I was going to ask you, where were you? And you shared that because we did a commemoration of it 2 years ago, the 50th anniversary commemoration of it. It's online too, so if you guys get a chance to check it out, we had a lot of people who were there or affiliated with people who were there 52 years ago now. And Dr. Karenga, again, pleasure to be here with you, man. I appreciate the information. I've taken all kind of good notes here. But you were with us with Dr. McIntosh early this summer when we were dealing with this whole piece about good times and this reboot and this attack on our culture that you have shared with us is so very important. And so I wanted to ask you about what do we do how do we deal with this attack? How do we defend ourselves against this attack? Your thoughts on that? I mean, because I think about the number of Black women even getting married, even though marriage is a certain piece, but it's still affecting our family. What we're looking at right now, they're saying that at the turn of the century, they were saying that 30% of the Black women in the 30s had never been married. And now, quarter century later, it's like 50% of all Black women of no matter what age have never been married. Never been married. So when I equate that to this attack on our culture and this self-hate. So that question, and another question too, is kind of following up on a other question we had. There's so many people today talking about we weren't even enslaved and all this nonsense that we're hearing about us being here already in mass and all that. I don't know if you ever get any of this nonsense, but I get a lot of it. It's very troubling sometimes to be having to deal with that. So, I mean, there's a few other questions, but I'm gonna leave it at that because I know we're short on time, but just want to hear you comment on those things.
And tell me 1, 2, 3, those things you wanted.
Okay, how do we defend, your thoughts on us defending ourselves against this blatant attack on our culture, again, with the music that you kind of touched on, but and it's also about how we're going to defend ourselves. And then how do we deal with so many of our people being bewildered by all this? You didn't mention the names, and I took that note too, because a lot of times I mention the names and but those ideas of those people. And then because I even think about the whole piece about the Haitians supposedly eating dogs and cats and what have you. But these groups got us fighting against the Haitians. They got us thinking the Haitians are out to get our reparations, which is crazy, absolutely crazy, after all our brothers and sisters in Haiti sacrificed and the warriors that we know from Haiti and what they did. And now, again, this FBA and ADOS and all that, they got us fighting against Haitians. And now what are we to do now that even these European beasts are attacking our Haitian brothers and sisters who are here? I'm sorry, but that's it, man. That's, go ahead and elaborate however you want to on that.
Mm-hmm. No, appreciate what you said, if I understand it correctly, Kwame. Thanks for the history too, and for the question. These things trouble you a lot, but the reality is that we've got to go back to basics, right? And one of the things that we've got to do is, number one, try to shift our language from a negative evaluation of our people to a positive evaluation of our possibilities. So we don't let our enemies or our opposition determine what we do. We set our own agenda. And one of the things that we do, and I invite y'all all to, we have Black and World News Forum every Friday night. And we ask people to come with things they can praise Black people for. Because one of the things that the dominant society does is it gives us our language by which we talk about each other. It gives us the thought about each other, so that whether we want to or not, when we talk about Black people, we talk about what they haven't done, and we can't discuss what we do or have done, because all the time is taken with that. Now, Haji Malcolm said, and I take it seriously, that the logic of the oppressed cannot be the logic of the oppressor if they want liberation. And I said, in response to that, if we needed a new logic of liberation, we need a new language to inform that. So the question is, how do we talk about Blacks in dignity affirming and life enhancing ways so that we can extract paradigms of human possibility, examples of achievement? That's the answer. The answer to all our questions is in our own culture. And if we say we want our culture to be preserved, guess who got to preserve it? We who are conscious. We who are conscious have got to do it. Because, and this I draw from Fanon, even though it's my organization and structure here. I learned from Nana Fanon that people in oppression and unable to defend themselves and their conception of themselves go through 4 fundamental stages. The first is they doubt themselves, right? Who hasn't doubted even their right of presence? Sometimes people on campus, they don't know if they should be in a physics class. They know they can go to physical education, but physics, that's another thing. Sometimes Black people don't believe they should go to college. The white men say, no, you don't need to go to college. We're back to Haji Malcolm's conversation. White boy tell him, you need to be a carpenter. You can't be no lawyer. So we doubt our ability. We doubt our people. We doubt whether or not they'll ever get well, or that so many are sick that they're going to infect others, or they're going to influence others. And I want us to think differently. So we have our place we call Hekalu, our office, our headquarters. That's a sacred space. And when people come in there, they can't cuss. They can't talk bad about Black people. They have to bring something we can discuss that reaffirms our sacredness, that reaffirms our resourcefulness, our soulfulness, our resilience, right? That gives us a new conception of ourselves, so we don't doubt ourselves. Second, we deny ourselves, just like the question that Seba Chimbuko asked me about Black. Those people that raise that question, they're doubting themselves and they're denying themselves. They deny the priority of Blackness, right? Why? Because it's a problematic. Who wants to be Black in this age, just Black? You get more action being gay. Even the Black man, if you look at it, who is on television? The Black heterosexual man or the Black gay man? And I'm not putting gay people down. Black people should be wherever they can be, right? We need space everywhere, and all of us need space. But I'm just telling you how the European does. The European wants to destroy the heterosexual Black men in general, but especially the heterosexual Black. And so the Black man can't keep talking about what is wrong. We've got to sit down and we've got to think what is right, and we've got to build on it. We got to stop doubting ourselves. We got to stop denying ourselves. And we've got to stop condemning ourselves. So that's denial. First of all, doubt. First they doubt themselves, then they deny themselves, then they condemn themselves, and finally they mutilate themselves. And even us who are conscious, right, begin to doubt whether our people are going to ever wake up. I think we think they're not going to wake up. But we've got to be the model we want other people to be. And that's why we need to study history. We say we study history for 4 basic reasons. One, to learn its lessons. Haji Malcolm said, of all our studies, history is best prepared to reward our research. Second, to absorb its spirit of human possibility. For as Nana Garvey said, what humans have done, humans can do. Third, we study history to extract and emulate its models of human excellence and possibility. And that is what Dr. Mary McLeod means when she said, we're heirs or custodians of a great legacy. And we say, in return, we must bear the burden and glory of that legacy with strength, dignity, and determination. We must build on that legacy. And finally, of course, we study history to practice the morality of remembrance. That's where Nana Fanny Heyman tells us there are 2 things we should all care about: never to forget where we came from, and always praise the bridges that carried us over. So I asked you, can we develop a new language and a new logic? Can we develop a program to deal with this? And can we ourselves establish a practice? One of the things I've noticed, Kwabena, is that the nationalists don't get in organizations. The conscious people, they're usually not in organizations, and they don't have a plan. They have a critique, but the critique is not to wonder. See, we say we're supposed to question things. In ancient Egypt, we had the concept called nej ken, which means courageous questioning. So one of the things I have to stress with people is that questioning is not just what Nana Fanny Heyman does to the Americans. Say, I have to question America, right? We got to do that, right? It's more, though. It's especially wondering about. That's the big question. What does this mean? How can I live a good and meaningful life? How can I reach my people? How can I raise my children? How can I have a rightful relationship with the environment? You see, that's what I want to know. How do we rebuild our families? So we know the legacy of the Holocaust of enslavement, of the savagery of segregation, of the ravages of racism. Now, what is to be done? When do we have a meeting and say, how do we go forward now? And I want to join in that. And it's the same thing with the family. Now, let me tell you this. The white man worked to break up the black man and the woman. I used to be a social worker, and the white man paid the sister to keep the brother out the house. I mean, that's money in this. Some of the sisters still went on and did what they did, but it created an unstable environment. And brothers learned to, not all of them, but many, as you can tell, learned to dip and dab and then go. Just dip it and dab. You know what I mean? Let's be honest, right? Hit it and quit it. Get down and get away, right? That's not a good way. And I'm saying to you that we've got to, if we really believe in this, we've got to make high levels of commitment. Well, here's the issue, brothers and sisters. There are two kinds of responsibilities. We are, the oppressor is responsible for our oppression, but we're responsible for our liberation. And part of our responsibility is to hold him accountable for his oppression of us. But we cannot do that if we are not responsible for our liberation. And we've got to talk more about how do we liberate ourselves. And what else can we read? And what else can we do? And what structures can we build that house and advance our aspirations? We all know each other and we like each other. We talk. But what do we actually do together on a regular basis? That's what I want to know. How do we rebuild the movement? This is why we say, and I guess we can close here, Brother Rahh.
Yeah, bro.
This is our duty to know our past and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new future and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive way. And this too, Black people, we say, you must continue the struggle, keep the faith, and hold the line. Love and respect our people and each other. Practice the Nguzo Saba. Seek and speak truth. Do and demand justice. Be constantly concerned with the well-being of the world and all in it. And here, key, dare help rebuild the overarching movement that prefigures and makes possible the good world we all want and deserve to live in and leave as a legacy worthy of the name and history African. Can we do that?
Yeah,
That's the key to all of it. That's the key to it. So let's work together, Black people. Let's not let this be the last time we meet or talk, right? But let's ask what kind of program can we develop to serve the interests of the people and to keep in touch with each other. I enjoy this. We have to do this again, Professor Rahh.
Yeah, Maulana. Asante.